Our channel goes the extra mile to bring you interesting, detailed and superbly edited videos. This video is no exception. There's so much content, I thought I'd show you a little introduction before we get started. All coming up. There's a few unusual things about this old lift installation. For one, the lifts keep stopping, then just seconds later they change direction. There is of course a reason for this, but first, thank you very much to Georges Peier for supplying all the footage in this video. Let's start with the lift cars, which have the pop-out buttons. In a moment, I will show you what happens if you pull out all the buttons whilst the lift is in motion. Then we're moving up to the motor room for some up-close action of the old lift machinery. The whole idea of the pop-out buttons is that if you change your mind, you can pull the button back out and press a different floor. When the lift reaches the last call in the direction it's travelling in, all latched buttons then pop out. So what happens if you pull out all the calls whilst the lift is in motion? Does it just stop dead? Let's find out in this old Platt Schindler lift. The answer is, if a call is not found, then it just keeps going until it reaches the highest or lowest floor. The lift is started by an active call, but the lift doesn't know where the call is, only the direction it's in. It only finds it by travelling into it. If it's the last call in that direction, all the car call buttons are then released. When we have a look into the motor room, watch out for some strange behaviour where a lift goes in one direction, stops, Then just 2 seconds later, it's going in the other direction. I'll explain why later. Did you notice the pulley system that runs across the ceiling a few moments ago? It turns this device when the lift is moving. There's lots going on here, and I'll go through it with you in more detail later. As we go through this motor room, I'll also explain some other interesting devices. Schindler seemed to be using motors for everything, even the brake, which is this device at the top here. This motor brake system is unique to Schindler. When powered, it rotates a disc. The disc is linked to the brake underneath it. When it turns, it releases the brake. It normally does a quarter of a turn like this. The brake motor must remain powered to keep the brake released. When the lift stops, the springs always apply the brake and the brake motor returns back to its neutral position. The brake here is slightly different. It rotates this way to release the brake, and it returns here to apply the brake. But it also turns the other way. This is strange because whichever direction it rotates, it has the same effect. It releases the brake. So why does it need to turn in both directions? From what I can see, there are a couple of reasons. And it's related to the contacts that you can see on either side here. The first reason is to form an interlock. It prevents the up and down motor control relays coming on at the same time. If this happened, 2 high voltage phases would short circuit. Between relays, there is a bar that pivots in the middle. When the up relay is on, the bar is pushed, and the other end sticks up and physically stops the down relay from coming on, and vice versa. On the left and right here, we can see the equivalent of the up-down relays that I've just shown you. Schindler has used the brake motor to physically control the intended direction of the main motor. The floor selector decides which direction the lift needs to go, which then commands the brake motor to turn anti-clockwise for down and clockwise for up. Whichever way it rotates, this releases the brake. But it's the contacts on the left or the right side that feed the phases to the main motor to control its direction. There is also a mechanical linkage between the left and right contacts here, making it impossible for both to be on at the same time. But why does the brake motor need to rotate to control the lift direction when it could have been done by relays and an interlock bar instead? It's a little over-engineered in my opinion, but there must be a reason for this, and if you know the answer, please feel free to comment. But it could also be related to the second reason, for safety. You'll notice that there is no protection against anyone accidentally touching a live connection anywhere around the controllers. Most of this gear is run from step-down transformers. You'd probably still get an electric shock if you touched anything, but you'll be risking serious injury if you touch the voltage from the building's incoming 3-phase main supply. Therefore, the really high voltage switchgear is on the back wall. These big relays control the speed to the motor and the starting of the motor using the star delta system. The really high voltage switchgear is on the back wall and localized around the motor where it is required. Now to explain why the lifts keep changing directions without taking on any passengers. A cord is placed on the second floor. The lift on the left is dispatched upwards to find it, but the other passing lift cannot ignore a call and takes it. With the call cancelled by the lift on the right, the other lift doesn't find the call it was sent for. It might find a different call, or it'll end up at the top floor. It's then dispatched again to another call. With computer control still another 20 years away, relay logic has its limitations, and lift designers either have to factor in these scenarios, which adds more complexity and cost, or just accept it as a limitation. Back to some motor room footage. Then there's these clockwork timers, the floor selector, and what finally happened to these lifts? Are they still there? These are old mechanical clockwork timers. Here's a similar one in action. This one is the door timer. Whilst the lift is moving, there is a small internal motor inside which winds it up. When the lift arrives, it starts unwinding to time 4 seconds. At the end of the time, it activates a switch. And it looks like this one can time up to 10 seconds. Looking back at these lifts, the timers here are for all kinds of things. This timer's backplate is still here, but it's been removed and replaced by a simple electronic timer. When this lift was installed, it could only have been a short period in time before electronic timers were available. Let's rewind a little and go through how some of this kit works. First, the lift motor. Before the age of variable frequency drives, motors need 2 separate windings to achieve a high and low speed. Schindler decided to achieve this by using 2 separate motors, effectively bolted together. So one of these motors is for slow speed and the other one is for high speed, and they're switched on and off separately. This massive wheel is the floor selector and has several functions. To start with, it's linked to the lifts using this pulley system. When the lift moves, the pulley system rotates this drum, which is then geared down and turns the floor selector. These are the slow down and stopping contacts. These are the direction logic switches and move as the lift passes them. They divide the call buttons to either being above or below the lift. This is a travelling contact. There's 2 of them. One selects the floor the lift's at, and the other is for the up-down lamps on each landing. This is a fascinating device, and it deserves a far more detailed video on it. And you're in luck, because I've already created it. Please check it out. There is a link to it at the end of this video, or you can find it in the video description. This is not quite the end of the video. There's a few images to show you, then we'll have a look at the aftermath. As this footage is from a couple of years ago, we'll have a look at what the lifts look like now. This entire video focused on the old lifts, which were installed in 1962. You're probably not aware of lift number 3. This was installed fairly recently. It's an MRL, which means the motor is at the top of the lift shaft. one of the old car operating panels, a new addition to Georges Peier's museum. This gives you a clue to what's happened to lift 1 and 2. "61 years the lifts lasted, but with the knowledge to know how to fix these lifts disappearing, it was only a matter of time before they were replaced. For me, modern day lifts just get me from A to B, and I have very little interest in filming a circuit board. But it is interesting what they did to the lifts. Recognize this room? If you don't, then here's a little clue. The lift shaft for lift 2 was extended up into the former motor room to create floor 6. The original motor room no longer exists and is now a top floor lift lobby served only by lift 2. Lift 3 was modernised a few years ago, and Lift 1 has been completely removed and no longer exists. Thanks once again to Georges Peier for the footage shown here. I go to a lot of time and effort to make these videos as interesting as possible for you, my audience. I do hope you found this video interesting. If I don't find the video interesting myself, then it doesn't get uploaded. Therefore, quality, not quantity, is our motto. Please consider subscribing to the Mr. Matt and Mr. J channel, and thank you very much for watching.